Hundreds of women were poisoned and left to die by their employers, who forced them to paint watch faces with glowing radioactive paint, a practice that would become one of the most egregious examples of industrial disaster in American history. The women, mostly teenagers, were instructed to moisten their brushes with their tongues, thereby ingesting small amounts of radium daily, which would eventually lead to radioactive poisoning. But here's where it gets dark. Their employers, including the United States Radium Corporation and the Waterbury Clock Company, were fully aware of the risks, yet they chose to prioritize profits over the lives of their employees. The story of the Radium Girls, as they came to be known, is a testament to the darker aspects of human nature and the long, hard fight for women's rights. The Radium Girls worked at factories in Orange, New Jersey, and Waterbury, Connecticut, painting the faces of watches and other instruments with a glow-in-the-dark paint containing radium. The paint, which was marketed as harmless, was actually highly toxic, and the women were not provided with any protective gear or warnings about the dangers of radium. In fact, they were encouraged to use their tongues to shape their brushes, a practice that would increase their exposure to the radioactive substance. The year was 1917, and World War I was raging in Europe, creating a high demand for glow-in-the-dark watches and other instruments. The companies producing these items saw an opportunity to capitalize on the war effort and hired hundreds of women to work in their factories, often under the guise of patriotic duty. And this is where everything fell apart. As the women began to fall ill, their employers refused to take responsibility, claiming that the radium was harmless and that the women's symptoms were the result of other factors, such as syphilis or promiscuity. But here's the thing. The women knew that something was terribly wrong. They were experiencing severe pain, fatigue, and anemia, and many of them were suffering from necrosis of the jaw, a condition that would eventually become known as radium jaw. The women tried to seek medical attention, but their doctors were often baffled by their symptoms, and the companies continued to deny any wrongdoing. One of the most notorious cases was that of Catherine Donahue, a former Radium Girl who became a prominent figure in the fight for workers' rights. Donahue, who had worked at the United States Radium Corporation, was diagnosed with radium poisoning in 1928, and her case would eventually become a rallying cry for the Radium Girls and their families. Nobody talks about this part, the ways in which the companies tried to silence the women, often by offering them small settlements or threatening them with lawsuits. The companies also hired doctors to testify that the women's symptoms were not related to radium exposure, and they even went so far as to bribe journalists to write favorable stories about the companies. As the years went by, the Radium Girls continued to suffer, and their numbers began to dwindle. Many of them died young, often in their 20s or 30s, and those who survived were left with lifelong health problems. But the women refused to give up, and they began to organize, demanding justice and compensation for their suffering. The most prominent of these women was probably Catherine Donahue, who, along with several other Radium Girls, filed a lawsuit against the United States Radium Corporation in 1928. The lawsuit, which would become a landmark case in the history of workers' rights, was a major escalation of the conflict between the women and the companies. And this is where it gets really dark. The companies, in an effort to discredit the women, hired private investigators to spy on them, and they even went so far as to exhume the bodies of deceased Radium Girls to prove that their deaths were not related to radium exposure. The lawsuit, which was eventually settled out of court, was a major victory for the Radium Girls, but it was also a bittersweet one. Many of the women had died by the time the settlement was reached, and those who survived were left with lifelong health problems. The settlement also did little to address the underlying issues of workers' rights and industrial safety, and it would take decades for the United States to implement meaningful regulations to protect workers from hazardous materials like radium. But here's the thing. The story of the Radium Girls is not just a footnote in the history of industrial disasters. It's a testament to the power of women's rights and the importance of fighting for justice. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, the Radium Girls, who were once just ordinary women working in factories, became a symbol of resistance and a reminder that the struggle for workers' rights is never truly won. The legacy of the Radium Girls can be seen in the many regulations and laws that were implemented to protect workers from hazardous materials. The Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, for example, was a direct response to the kinds of industrial disasters that the Radium Girls suffered, and it has saved countless lives over the years. The story of the Radium Girls has also inspired numerous books, films, and documentaries, and it continues to be a source of fascination and outrage for people around the world. And this is where it gets really interesting. The story of the Radium Girls is not just a dark chapter in American history. It's also a reminder of the power of collective action and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. The Radium Girls, who were once just ordinary women working in factories, became a symbol of resistance and a reminder that the struggle for justice is never truly won. The climax of the story came in 1928, when Catherine Donahue and several other Radium Girls testified before the Illinois State Legislature, demanding justice and compensation for their suffering. The testimony, which was widely reported in the press, was a major turning point in the case, and it helped to galvanize public opinion against the companies. The testimony was also a testament to the bravery and resilience of the Radium Girls, who, despite their suffering, refused to give up in the face of overwhelming odds. And this is where everything comes together. The testimony, the lawsuit, the settlement, and the legacy of the Radium Girls all combine to create a story that is both heartbreaking and inspiring. The story of the Radium Girls is a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for justice and always a reason to keep fighting. In the aftermath of the settlement, the Radium Girls continued to suffer, and many of them died young. But their legacy lived on, inspiring generations of workers and activists to fight for their rights. The story of the Radium Girls is a testament to the power of collective action and the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. And this is where it gets really personal. The story of the Radium Girls is not just a footnote in the history of industrial disasters. It's a reminder that the struggle for justice is never truly won, and that we must always be vigilant in the face of oppression. The Radium Girls, who were once just ordinary women working in factories, became a symbol of resistance and a reminder that the fight for workers' rights is never truly over. In the end, the story of the Radium Girls is a complex and multifaceted one, full of twists and turns and unexpected surprises. It's a story about courage and resilience, about the power of collective action, and about the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And this is where it all comes together. The story of the Radium Girls is a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for justice, and always a reason to keep fighting. The Radium Girls may be gone, but their legacy lives on, inspiring us to fight for a world where workers are treated with dignity and respect, and where the struggle for justice is never truly won. Subscribe for more stories like this, and join us next time as we explore another dark chapter in human history.